FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, gold and silver after the first of the year, pretty much heading nicely higher. Now it looks like they've hit a rough patch. So we've got David Morgan of the Morgan Report with us now. David, good to talk to you again.
Kerry, it's great to be back.
Hey, so David, where do you think we are in the precious metals cycle currently?
On a short-term basis?
Yeah, pretty much short. Medium and long-term, I think we both agree where we are.
Yeah, long-term, we're certainly going to be much higher. Short-term calls are always, more difficult. I mean, we thought there'd be a pretty good run in the metals starting the beginning of the year, and we're correct on that. A couple reasons for that. One, there's a pretty good seasonality that precious metals do well in the first quarter of every year. And that seasonality is fairly predictable. Second reason it was that we had done so poorly in metals prices in 2013 that there was a great deal of tax loss selling at the end of the year, and those things tend to exaggerate the downside. A lot of people, eliminate their positions, be them futures positions or primarily mining equity positions. So because of that overselling, you might call, or extreme selling, then there's usually a pretty good bounce back for no other reason than they're oversold. So if you're technical, and I am somewhat, you have a very oversold condition. So because of a very oversold condition, start the new year, a lot of these same people actually buy back their positions because they believe in the companies. They want to take the tax loss, and then they buy back in, and that, of course, pushes the prices up because there's some buying pressure, not selling pressure. Anyway, going on where I think we are, we've had a nice run up, and now both gold and silver have kind of stalled out, regardless of what's going on with Ukraine and Russia and all the geopolitical tensions. You could obviously make a connection there, connect the dots that maybe this isn't the way it should be fundamentally, but nevertheless it is the way that it is. We have to accept it regardless of, what our views are. So I think we're probably in for a few weeks here of a pullback, but I don't see a significant pullback here. In fact, I think it's going to pull back for a few weeks, and then we're probably going to bounce back up. In silver, that means breaking up through the $21 level again, and for gold, it means coming back up to the $1,300 level. And we may see these levels move up again to levels that silver's already reached, which is the $22 level. It's reached that mark very briefly, but it has recently, talking nearer term. And gold, it's already been, in the mid-1300s. I think gold could accelerate. Gold seems to be pretty much leading at this current time frame. Gold seems to have more interest in it than silver at the current time. Lots of reasons for that, and one is it's really more of the establishment metal. I mean, even though the bankers poo-poo it all the time, look at what they do, not what they say, and central banks have been net buyers of gold for the last couple of years. And a huge shift from west to east continues with the Chinese buying with both hands. You have exchanges that are opening up that are more physically oriented, that in the east or in Asia. And so there's lots of reasons to be bullish on gold, and particularly both short and long term. Because of those facts, I think you could actually see gold do as well, if not a little better than silver on this next move up. Once we hit that, I'll probably should delay what I think, but the summer doldrums are usually fairly predictable. That seasonality works fairly well also, but I think we could see another move up into the April timeframe or early May.
And normally we never talk about the other two noble metals, as they're referred to, platinum and palladium, but I'm going to bring them up here because normally of these 4 precious metals, one of them's a leader, one of them's a laggard, and the other 2 are just going along for the ride. And I would say here we're looking at palladium, 791. That one is really strong. Platinum was kind of leading the way for quite a while. Now it's kind of fallen back in the pack. Silver has really been the laggard here, but palladium really strong, breaks into that $800 territory after this couple of week hiatus. Might it pull the others along with it?
Right. Well, as you know, the paid people in the Morgan Report, I mean, and a lot of the stuff I reserve for paid members because obviously they're paying us and they should get our best thinking.
Absolutely.
And we did a special report. We did a special report on the PGMs, and we emphasized palladium substantially, even over platinum, and gave our reasons why. And I actually took a pretty nice position in palladium. We outlined different ways to do it. There's very few companies you can buy. You can buy the physical metal, of course. There's ETFs that specialize in palladium. So there's several ways that you can participate in that market. And we've been right. We actually kind of picked it right at almost the perfect time. And one thing I'll comment on, I don't say this often, I've probably said it maybe 3 times in the 14, 15 years I've been doing interviews on the internet or regular radio shows as well, but mostly on the internet, regarding precious metals, economy, and that type of thing. But when I started trading actively, I mean, I had a couple futures accounts, and I shifted around. This is like the 3rd broker I had. And I had a broker, and this guy was able to retire from his commodities trading like 30 years old. So I really got a really good broker because, if you're in the game to make money and you make a lot of it, then obviously you're doing well. And he taught me that whites lead yellow. He was a big believer that silver and gold led silver or the whites, platinum, palladium, or silver led gold. Now, that was more true in those days than now. I've revised my position that sometimes gold leads and sometimes silver leads. But at the time, I did a fair amount of trading of the PGMs. And there's a pretty strong seasonality with them as well. Anyway, the bottom line is that I've been saying, mostly privately, that watch palladium. And palladium really has broken out to the upside. I mean, as you said, it's the strongest of the 4. Most people don't pay any attention to it. Most people know very little about what I call the other white metals, platinum and palladium. And yet, these are more physically oriented metals than even silver and gold, because even though they have the leverage and they have the paper plasterers out there, because they are on exchange and there are ETFs, they're such minuscule, small physical markets that the physical will take over in those markets a lot more readily than they would in either gold or silver, and they will in those markets as well. So palladium really is a signaling case, and I've said this, I think, 3 or 4 times to again, subscribers to the Morgan Report that are on what I call the advanced service, which is the basic plus service, which I get to look over my shoulder as I'm doing technical work and the videos that we shoot at the mining companies. And there's a lot to that, but part of that service is that they get to listen to me talk as I'm looking at charts. And I said several months back, before we did a special update report on the PGMs, how important it was, and to watch it break out. And that'll be a subtle clue that hardly anyone will pay any attention to. But it's a clue of, 1, that the precious metals bull market is intact, and 2, that will signal that we're ready for the other metals to follow along. So palladium making a breakout move, which it has, not selling off much even on these sell-offs like gold, again, is a subtle clue. Very few pay attention to it. Will it work this time or won't it? I'm not going to put my neck out much further than I already have, but I'll say that it works a good 85% of the time, and I think it's working again this time. So thanks for asking the question. Most people don't really pay a great deal of attention to those metals, but look, we're here to make money. We certainly like, precious metals in general. Platinum, palladium investments are certainly not the areas that you should start, but if you are a sophisticated investor and you already have a gold and silver position, as we suggested in that month's write-up a month or 2 ago, certainly a place to look at.
Yeah, and the idea of holding them in physical makes no sense because, look, 99.5% of the population would not know palladium if they tripped over it. 96% of the population would not know what platinum was, and really they're really industrial metals that are precious, but let's face it, the population is clueless about it, and it's just not for the faint of heart. But the beauty of them is they can be manipulated from time to time, but they're necessity to the economy, because without them, basically the cities of the Western world would be choking on smog means that the physical, like you said, they're essentially physical markets, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So want to talk about copper. Market I totally can't fathom. I don't understand it, but it's taken a big hit lately.
Yeah, let's talk about copper. It's called Dr. Copper in many circles. And the reason it's called Dr. Copper is because, most of us have some respect for someone that earns a PhD or an MD. And it's always been equated with what the overall global health is of the global economy. So if copper is doing well, it portends that the global economy is going to do well. Copper does poorly, it portends that the global economy is going to do poorly. And that's basically a very accurate way to look at copper. That's a pretty accurate description of what it shows you in advance. And so since it's broken down, obviously it's portending that we're going to be seeing less robust economic recovery, which in my view, there really isn't an economic recovery. And copper is signaling that things going forward are not looking brighter, they're looking dimmer. I mean, I think, that is a fairly good summation of the situation.
Right. And that means you're talking about copper, you're talking about China, obviously, right?
Yeah, primarily. I mean, obviously there's some new building going on, in all locales, all domiciles, U.S. included, but primarily the big drivers for commodities overall has been China and the China story. And that, of course, is something that everyone's paying a great deal of attention to. And what we don't know exactly, although we certainly get our information like everyone else, is that China really isn't doing that well, and that their growth rate has curtailed from what it was. And I believe those to be true statements. And because of that, you're going to see less demand and less copper demand. The other thing is that China and others, but particularly China, is very good at stockpiling reserves of commodities, particular commodities that don't rot, like soybeans, so meaning metals. And you can stockpile copper in warehouses, then obviously you've got an advantage, especially if you buy at the right price, which they seem to be quite good at. So that's another factor, is that the rumors being that the stockpiled amount that China might need for pick an amount of time is already in place, and therefore the paper markets, the floating price, can adjust as it is, again, showing a breakdown at below the $3 level. And this is a concern to a lot of us. I would agree that it is portending that things are not as rosy going forward as they might have been.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about this up next on the Financial Survival Network with David Morgan.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Do you have Medicare or health insurance through your employer? If so, listen up. The healthcare reform wasn't written to save the healthcare industry or even to lower healthcare costs. Shoot, it isn't even designed to insure the uninsured. It's just a temporary political byproduct. Like a flat rock you step on in a swiftly moving stream, Obamacare is just a means to an end. Want to learn more about Obama's ultimate objective? Then you'll want to review our latest research presentation found on oclies.com. In it, a health expert and industry insider explains what you think you know about caring for your health is about to drastically change in 2014. Plus, he details the simple steps you could take to save thousands of dollars per year in health costs. It's free for you to preview at oclies.com. Don't waste time. What you don't know about the healthcare reform could hurt you and your family.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we are back with David Morgan on the Financial Survival Network. So, David, there's also been talk that they've got multiple collateralizations in China of these copper reserves, much like it's accused in the COMEX and in different gold and silver repositories in the U.S., GLD, SLV, wherever they might be held. And nobody knows who owns what. And I guess they're learning some of the worst things about the Western financial system over in Asia, aren't they?
Well, they are. I mean, it's, I don't know what to comment on other than to add on what you just said. I mean, the whole system has been corrupt and is more corrupt than any time that I'm aware of in my lifetime, meaning since I was born. I'm sure there's areas in history that I've studied that were probably worse. But as far as, modern times, this is just beyond belief. So, it applies to the macro picture as well as the micro picture. I mean, as Mike Maloney and others have said, if you can't hold it, you don't own it. And, it's really difficult for a nation state when you've got, the LBMA and you've got these big capital formation type companies or associations or exchanges that are basically there and we would want to think above reproach. In other words, when you buy something, you store it there, it's there. But, going back to Morgan Stanley on the silver side and these people charging silver investors interest and storage fees for silver that never existed. I mean, this is preposterous, but exactly what happened. And instead of putting, some people behind bars, they just got, a financial fine for being totally corrupt. I mean, total fraud. I mean, to sit there and pay for silver that you don't get and then to pay storage fees for non-existent silver. I mean, this is total, complete, absolute 100% fraud. And yet again, all they get's a fine. Anyway, back on point, Kerry, situation of, the East and the West. I mean, it goes both ways. I'm certainly not trying to defend China or the U.S. or anybody in particular. I'm trying to be objective here, but it's more pervasive now, I think, than any other time that I'm aware of, again, in my lifetime.
Yeah, one day the history books will be writing about this, and they won't be too charitable about it because just the greed and the corruption run amok, and there's no political will, there's no desire to deal with this and to purge the system. And I just never believed that I'd live through a period of time where this illegality would just be tolerated and embraced.
Yeah, and there's excuses made in the public domain. I mean, they're too big to fail, too big to jail. I mean, these are terms that are actually thrown out in the public discourse. I mean, what kind of economy can you have when they admit corruption, but if we took them, if they're too big to jail, meaning that if we took them to task and put them behind bars, then that entity would go down or could go down. And if that happened, then, the whole economy could fail. I mean, this is the implication. You can read it however you want. It really tightens up my stomach when I hear stuff like that because, the free market, when it's allowed to be free, and we haven't really had a true free market for maybe forever, but we've certainly had a lot closer to a true free market years and years and years ago, will purge these things. I mean, once people learn that they've been conned, they quit making investments, get their money back out if they can. They do whatever they can, but the market will purge these kind of things without the regulators being involved. And yet, of course, a lot of on the other side of the political spectrum think all we need is harsher regulations. I don't care how many regulations you put in place. If people are dishonest, they're dishonest. They're going to they're going to break the regulation. You cannot legislate honesty. You can only the only honesty that's really determined is, in my view and studied view, is one, have an honest financial system. And this is where gold and silver are so important. The more honest the monetary system, the more honest the moral structure of the society. You can go back to Rome and verify that. As the denarius was corrupted more and more, the moral structure of society corrupted more and more. And we're seeing the same thing again. Look at what the moral structure was prior to August 15th, 1971 to where it is now. Now, this is a subjective thing, and I know that, it's really hard to put into like a data point. But if you just, you're my age, your age, Kerry, I mean, think back when you were a kid of, how many people had to lock their bicycle with 3 locks to go into the grocery store to buy some gum and come out. You just parked your bike and came out, and chances were very good that, nothing would happen to it. I'm just using that as an illustration. The point I'm making is that as the moral as the degradation of the currency takes place, the degradation in society takes place right along with it.
Yeah, in 1971, I mean, there weren't that many baristas, but I guarantee you they weren't armed either. And look, the crime rates and everything else you can track it right along and go back to before the founding of the Federal Reserve. And yeah, I mean, look, there's been times where the crime rate has been totally insane. In the 1800s in New York, everyone was armed and waiting for a confrontation in New York City. But there was a morality that is lacking now throughout the society. And also when your nation becomes a nation of gamblers at one level or another, and look, in the early 2000s, the biggest growth industry in the United States was the so-called gaming industry. You know, Las Vegas, that was the growth capital of the country. So obviously there was something really inherently wrong with the country even before the crash. And we were just kind of ignoring it and kind of hoping for the best. So I agree with you. If you don't have honest money, you're not going to have honest anything in society. And to think that you can somehow kind of purge the system and make it right, short of an all-out collapse, is looking less and less possible, isn't it?
Certainly appears that way. I mean, I don't like being labeled a doomer. I like to think of myself as a realist, but the real facts bear that out, and history bears that out. There's never been a time ever recorded where we've gotten in the position that we're currently in where it doesn't end badly. And badly doesn't mean the end of the world, and it doesn't mean you're not going to eat or any of these things. But what it does mean is, generally speaking, there's a depression, meaning that people are depressed. They're not very happy. And I would conjure a thought experiment. If you're lucky enough to have a job and you're doing well right now, good for you, and I'm happy for you. But think of all the unemployed or unemployable that exist right now, probably the highest in this country that it's been on a percentage basis in a very, very long time. I would imagine a lot of those folks are not feeling that good. They're probably depressed. They're probably wishing that they could have had their old job back or whatever. And this is the real situation. The reason you don't see these big, soup lines like you saw in the Great Depression of the 30s is that everybody gets one of these cards and they can discreetly go into whatever grocery store they wish to and get food and all that. And I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not making a value judgment on that. What I'm saying is that if those people had to wait in line to get food, then it would be much more apparent to the average citizen walking by. So, well, what's that long line for? Well, those are people that need food, but you don't see it because they're integrated into society. But it doesn't mean that it isn't a great percentage of the population that are requiring assistance in order to eat properly.
Yeah, we have virtual bread lines now instead of, out and out bread lines, but they're waiting at Walmart for the stroke of midnight at the first of the month to go get their diapers, baby formula, whatever else they need. And that's really the fact of the matter. So even though they're not lined up around the block because of the EBT card, that miracle of technology, we still have it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the question is, what's next? And the collapse, it's been ongoing since 2008, and really the next phase is coming, and it's going to be a lot less pretty than the ones that came before it.
I agree. I think that you have to look at where we are in reality, and really nothing has recovered since 2008, even though you constantly hear that on the mainstream media, that the facts bear differently. And because of that, the next down leg starts from a lower point. So you're going from a low point to a lower point, which means things are not getting better.
Yeah, it's really lower highs and lower lows, and that's really it. And yeah, you'd say a depression, people are depressed, all these people on antidepressants, record numbers, and that's not because happy days are here again, quite literally, and sad to think of, but you have to find your own internal happiness and make the most of the situation, because there's really nothing else you could do about it. So, David, You got a couple publications that we can gladly subscribe to. Where do we find you?
You bet. The easiest is the website, themorganreport.com. If you want to go to YouTube, it's Silver Guru. You want to go to Twitter, it's at SilverGuru22. If you come to the website, themorganreport.com, we have a free e-letter that goes out every Saturday. We have, of course, the paid services as well, which are at 3 levels, and they're described on the right-hand side of the website.
All right. And, of course, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, and you can find the links to David's sites right there. David, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.